Hello, I'm Mrs H. You can find my patterns at www.mrs-h.com. In today's video, we're going to be sewing the Adventurer Sling, which is this little bag right here. And I absolutely love this. You can wear it two ways. So I've got it here to wear over the right shoulder, and in this video we're going to sew the version to wear it over your left shoulder. So let's have a little look at the sling bag and then I'll show you it on. So we've got a front zip pocket here with a nice little pocket in there, and then the main compartment has a zip closure, and then inside we've got a set of credit card slots, which I don't know if you'll be able to see fully in there. There's nothing else in there, just the credit card slots, but the back of the credit card slots does form a little slip pocket. Okay, and then the strap, we've cut the strap in two pieces just to try and save you some fabric, but if you're using webbing or you've got longer fabric, please do cut that as one length, and the instructions for that, or the measurements, sorry, are in the pattern. Now the strap does connect using these swivel clips and triangle rings. You can swap that hardware out. However, I do like to use these swivel clips on a bag like this, because then if you're wearing a particularly bulky coat, you can pop it on without having to worry about going over your head. You can just unclip, pop it into place and re-clip. Okay, so this version, this is the one from the pattern step photos. This is to be worn over your right shoulder, and as you can see, it sits quite nice and close to the body. There's quite a lot of extra length in that strap, which will account for those who are slightly broader in the chest or like to wear a nice padded coat, or a fluffy cardigan and a padded coat. So that's the blue one, which is to be worn over the right shoulder. There are instructions in the pattern for doing right or left, okay, and it's on the pattern piece. And then this is exactly the same, but for the left shoulder. So we've got the main zip closure here. Hang on, I think my lining's caught inside there because I've literally just made it and then pressed it and not really tucked everything back into place. So the card slots are in the bottom there of the lining. You've got the zip pocket in the front here, like the other one, and exactly the same. To put it on, you can just pop it over. Oh, I've done it a different way this time. You can pop it over and fasten it up. I probably should have lengthened that strap slightly before I put it on. Please excuse that motorbike going past. There we go. So that's the one to be worn over your left shoulder, and you can lengthen that as well. Let's lengthen it a bit more, make it a little bit more comfortable for me. A little bit broader in chest than I allowed for. Okay, so there's the one to be worn over your left shoulder. That's got the same features as the one to be worn over your right shoulder. They're just mirrored. So the instructions for that are on the pattern piece. You can choose whichever one you prefer. I really like this bag. I think it's great. It's great for going hands-free, dog walking, concerts, shopping trips where you've got a lot of things to carry, days out with children, or I don't know, dogs, I guess. But I think it's a really good make. It's quite a quick make. It's quite fun. You can modify it. You can always leave the pocket off. You can do a motif, embroidery. You can add a transfer, whatever you like. I really hope that you enjoy making this, and I would love to see what you make at Sewing Patterns by Mrs H. Please do tag us. But why don't you gather your supplies together and let's get sewing. So first of all, we'll have a little look at our stabilisers. So we've interfaced all of our fabric pieces apart from the card slots and the zip tabs, which we'll interface later. But I wanted to have a little look at the main panel stabilisers. This is piece BS. And as you can see, I fused my Decaville light onto my non-fusible fleece. But I just wanted to talk this through because you can wear the bag on either shoulder, your right shoulder or your left shoulder. And I'm doing this one to fit on my left shoulder. So what I did was I cut the zip box out. So you're going to cut 2 of these pieces anyway, mirrored, so you'll end up with 2 pieces. So just choose the piece that will fit onto this piece of fleece, so with the fleece with the little angle on the left hand side. And then with the Decaville, you're going to cut the zip box opening, this rectangle here, and depending on which shoulder you want to wear it on, that's which side you'll have glue side up or glue side down. So if you're going to wear it on your right shoulder, cut the zip box cut out with Decaville glue side up. Okay, so that'll be, imagine this is a Decaville, so you'll cut it with a glue side up like so. And then if you want to wear the bag on your left shoulder, you're going to cut the zip box cut out with a glue side down. So that's what I've done. I've just laid this on top. It's the same pattern piece for the fleece and the Decaville. So I cut my fleece first and then I trimmed it down and cut the Decaville, and then I've cut this zip box cut out with the glue side down, and then I've gone ahead and fused it on. You can fuse it on first and then cut it out if you like, but this Decaville is going to be sandwiched in between the fabric. So if you just hold it up to you, imagining that the fabric is attached to there, that will be the front panel of your bag, and you can work out which shoulder that will fit on. So this will fit on my left shoulder. If it was the other way around and I had my Decaville on this side, then I would attach my fabric to that and that would sit on my right shoulder. Okay, so I'm making one for the left shoulder this time, and once we've got our stabilizers ready, we just need our corresponding piece of fabric. So the Decaville light is going to be sandwiched in between the fleece and your fabric. So get the piece of fabric that corresponds to this shape with the Decaville sandwiched in between. Okay, and then we're just going to pop that on top and smooth it out, and then we are going to whiz round. Do you like my new clip pot holder? I've had a new one. So we've transferred some clips into it and some pins. Very fancy. Upgraded my videos, definitely. So we're just going to clip all the way around, just give it a nice smooth out. You can pin it if you prefer. But on this one, it's so much easier to clip when you've got Decaville or Decaville light involved. Okay, and then we're gonna baste around all of the side edges using 1/4 inch or 6mm seam allowance. So try and ignore the fact that you've got a zip box hole in the back there. And we're just going to start on one edge and go all the way around, 1/4 inch or 6mm seam allowance ish. That's more like 1/8 inch there. I think that's even less than 1/8 inch there. Just wiggle your way back to the right seam allowance if you go a bit small. Okay, so as I get to the corners, I'm just lifting my presser foot with my needle down and pivoting. And going back to where we started. So these stitches are purely just to hold the stabilizers onto the main panel, so don't worry too much about back stitching and things. Although I do tend to back stitch out of habit, I think. Right, so on the right side you can't tell that we've got a box there, but on the wrong side we've got our zip box opening. Okay, and we are not going to cut this out of our fabric. Okay, what we're going to do is pull the seam allowance back of the stabilizers and just trim that right down, and trim as close as you can to the stitching line without cutting through the stitches. Well, it doesn't really matter if you cut through the stitches. I regularly cut through stitches, but we're trying not to cut through the stitches because then that will hold the stabilizer to our fabric and we can treat it as one piece really. Okay, so we're just going all the way round, and this will just take some of the bulk out of this. If you're using faux leather, you might want to omit these stabilizers altogether, because it's quite a small bag and you want it to be a little bit flexible because of how you're going to wear it on your body. Okay, right, lovely. So we're going to repeat that for our second main panel. Here's one I prepared earlier. Ta-da! And then we can pop that main panel aside. We're going to work on this one with the zip box cut out, and we're going to need our zip pocket. That's piece E. It looks very tiny for a zip pocket, doesn't it? But this is a very small bag. I'm not used to such small bags, so I do keep catching myself thinking, should I make it a bit bigger? But no, I don't think I should make it a bit bigger because it's small for a reason. Right, so we'll need our ruler. We're going to draw a zip box on here. So I'm going to mark the center here. I'm just using a pencil. And then we're going to draw a box. So we're going to, let's have a look. We are going to place it 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters from this short end, and also 1 inch in from each end. So I'll just draw one line. So that's 2.5 centimeters from the short end and 2.5 centimeters in from each side, and that should give us a 5 inch or 12.5 centimeter long line. And then we're going to do a 1/2 inch zip box. Now this is an unusual one for me because normally I do a 3/8. So if you're used to using my patterns, just pay attention to that. It's a 1/2 inch or 1.2 centimeter zip box opening on this one. And then we'll do a little line each end to connect them and form a box. And then we're going to draw a line in the center of that box. And this is where we're going to snip through later to turn the pocket piece through. And then we'll do a little triangle at each end. It doesn't matter if yours is slightly wonky. Mine are always wonky for some reason. I've not quite fathomed that one out. It must be my measuring. Okay, so we've got our zip box there, and it's 1 inch from each side really on the back. Now we're going to pop this right sides together. So that's my right side, nice and gold, and this is my wrong side, which is the white of the interface. And we're going to pop this on the main panel, and we're going to line up the corner of the zip pocket with the corner of the main panel. Okay, so not this corner with the angle on, but the other corner, like so. Okay. This is nice and easy because there's not much measuring involved in this one. You just line it up with the edges. Now we're going to sew around the outside of this box, and I'm going to start here-ish. I'm going to sew with my normal stitch length, and I'm going to sew directly on the box. As I approach the corner, if it feels like I can't quite get right into the corner, I'm going to decrease my stitch length so that I can finish exactly in that corner, and I'm going to stop with my needle down. I'll lift my presser foot and pivot and sew along to, well, put the presser foot back down again, and then sew along to the next corner. And the same again, if I can't quite get there, then I'm going to reduce my stitch length down so that it can hit accurately. And we're going to sew around all 4 sides of the zip box, and we're going to try and ignore the fact that there's no stabilizer directly underneath this. Okay. And you can either back stitch or you can overlap your stitches when you come back round the other way. Oh, that was perfectly in the corner. No, it wasn't. I thought it was, but then I turned and it wasn't quite. So we'll just take another, there we go, another tiny stitch and then I go back up to my normal stitch length and sew across that short end of the box, maybe another tiny little stitch just to get in accurate. There we go, and back to my normal stitch length down this second long side. Okay, take your time doing this, there's no rush. Pivot, sew along the short end, back round. Oh, one more tiny stitch needed there. Okay, I'll just trim those threads. Okay, right, lovely. So what we've got there is nice and neat. We're going to cut through this central line, like so, between the two triangles, and then we're going to go up each leg or arm of the triangles. Oh dear, I've forgotten my sharp pointed scissors again. I think I might need to get a second pair that can live up here. Okay, so we're just going to snip along these arms of the triangles as close as we can to the stitches in the corner without actually snipping through the stitches. Okay, lovely. So now we are going to give it a nice little press. Put my little pressing mat down first. I like to give it a nice little press from this side first. Oh, hang on, sorry, I've got to untangle my wire. I've gone a bit around the leg of my table and I haven't got quite enough length on it. There we go. I wonder if one day they might invent a magical steam iron that doesn't need to be plugged in ever and never needs refilling. I think that would be amazing. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to push against our zip pocket piece. So pull your piece back and just press against that edge. That'll give us a nice neat finish when we push it through. And then the same on this end. This end's not quite so easy because there's not quite so much of it. Just pulling that back. And then the short end. And then the second short end. It is a little bit more long-winded, but you do get a much neater finish at the end. And then we're going to pop this through that opening that we've made. So push your zip pocket through that little slit that we've got there all the way through. Pull it out on the wrong side. Now don't be tempted to press from this side yet. Turn it over and press from the right side first, okay? Because there are going to be creases in these corners when you do a zip pocket. It's almost completely inevitable. There are ways of avoiding them, but they're a little bit more long-winded. But I find if you press from the right side, then those creases that you get will always be hidden inside the zip pocket. Now I have drawn my zip box in the wrong place, so I just need to trim a little bit of extra stabilizer away from the back of here. Yours will be in the right place because you'll be using the finished pattern pieces, but I'm still working on my draft pattern pieces at the moment. So that's a nice edit for me. Okay, so I'm just manoeuvring that into place so that the gold is hidden as well as it can be behind the green. Okay. And then once you're happy with it from this side, you can turn it over and press from the back side as well. And you can see those creases on the back there. So those are the creases that we've chosen to hide on the back so that they're not showing on the front. And I'm just going to clip this into place, which will hold it while we are working on it, just because it's so close to the edge of my main panel that it's really nice. I can actually clip it into place for once. Normally I can't clip it into place. Okay, pop my little pressing mat out of the way. Now we need one of our zips. So we need the zip that is the shorter zip. If you're using continuous zip tape, then they'll both be exactly the same length. But if you're using a ready-made zip, then yours will be the one that's got 5 inches worth of teeth and 1 inch of plain tape either end. Okay. So what we're going to do, I might just put a couple of hand stitches in there to keep that together. I've got some thread on my, oh gosh, this looks like it's a bit of a tangle, doesn't it? Bit of a tangled mess here. No, let's get a new hand needle out then. Oh, there might be one with a little bit of thread on. That's possibly the shortest threads in the world, but it might be enough. Let's give it a go. So I'm just going to quickly tack these ends together just to hold them in place while we're sewing it. Oh, there we go. That was ideal. That's exactly what we needed. Okay, so now we're going to tape this using our basting tape into place on the back of our panel. Okay. Lovely. So we'll get some double-sided basting tape. Oh, I better turn the page to check I haven't forgotten anything in the instructions. I can't be the only person who likes to follow my own instructions, because otherwise I do something wrong, even though I'm the one who's written the pattern. Okay, so we're going to add a little line of tape along the top and the bottom of this zip box opening. Here we go. Make sure that's nice and smoothed down. Then we can take the backing paper off, which is sometimes easier said than done with these tapes, isn't it? I keep mine in a plastic bag now because I find that they dry out quite quickly otherwise, because we have the dehumidifier going all day every day because of the damp in the studio. Right, so we're just going to line up the bottom of that zip with the bottom edge of the pocket. Make sure it's sort of even. We'll turn it over and even it out. But the top of your zip, when it's closed, should be facing this top, short top end there, okay? So we'll turn that over and make sure that that's, oh my goodness, for the first time in my entire life, that's perfectly centered. I think that's got to be a bit of a miracle there. Okay, so now we are going to use our top stitching stitch length until I get to the corners, and we're going to sew around the outside of this zip box opening 1/8 of an inch or 3 mil away from the edge. As before, if I need to decrease my stitch length to get right into the corners, then I am, because I want it to be nice and neat. I'm going to start around about there-ish because there's no lumps or bumps or anything to get in my way. And I'm going to leave my thread tails long and pull them through. Okay, so as I come up to my zip, I'm just lifting my presser foot and wiggling that zip pull out of the way. And then carry on. and then pivot and sew along the top and pivot and head back down the second long edge. Now I'm coming close to my zip pull again, so I'll lift my presser foot, wiggle that out of the way, lower my presser foot and carry on. And then back round. I'm going to see actually if I can tug this bobbin thread. Now my foot's very far away from my foot pedal at the moment, so there's no danger to my fingers. So I've just tugged on my bobbin thread to get a little loop, and that's the top thread coming through to the back. So I've just pulled my top thread through to the back in that way, so that it's out of the way, and then I can carry on. Now my thread is perfectly matched to my fabric, which is beautiful, but it does make it a bit hard to work out where you've started. Okay, so I'm going to cut these tails long and do the same again. So I'll do it so you can see it this time. So on the back here, I should have 3 threads. I should have the 2 that I've had before and then the one from just now. So there's a little loop there. I'm just going to gently tug on it and see if that's, yeah, so as I'm pulling on that little loop, it's pulling the thread through from the right side. There we go. So I can split those off into 2 sets of 2. And then I'm just going to tie a couple of little knots. And then I haven't got any visible starting and stopping on the right side, and they are nice and secure. There we go. Lovely. Okay, so now on the wrong side we're going to fold the zip pocket in half, matching raw edges, and we're going to sew around the 3 edges of this zip pocket, and we're not going to catch this main panel in our stitching. Okay, you might want to trim your zip teeth down slightly just to reduce a bit of bulk in that area. So I'm just sort of leaving about ½ an inch or 1.2 centimeters at the end. It's up to you whether you trim them or not. I've just trimmed them to reduce a little bit of bulk. I'm going to add a little bit of fray check to that, just to make sure that that doesn't fray, because we don't want our zip fraying whilst in use. Okay, now I do find it easier to have my zip pull in the middle when I'm closing up zip pockets, even though we're not doing a turning gap on this one, just because then you know that the zip pull is not going to be in the way. Right, so I think it's probably easiest clipping from the folded edge out, and I'm only catching my zip pocket pieces in my clips. The main panel is excluded from this. And then on this longer edge as well. Just want to make sure that that is perfectly caught together. Okay, so I'm probably going to sew from this side, and I'm just going to pull my main panel back so that I've got somewhere nice to follow. Okay, and we're going to sew around it using our regular stitch length and our regular seam allowance. All 3 edges. Don't worry about leaving turning gaps or anything. And then I've come to the corner, so I'm lifting my presser foot, pivoting and carrying on round. All the way to the end, and I've back stitched at the start and the end. Trim these threads. Then what we're going to do is we want to secure this pocket into our side and bottom seams. So I'm just going to whiz along the side and the bottom and sew in the seam allowance just to secure the zip pocket in, because we don't want that flapping around anywhere. We want to know exactly where it is. Okay, so that's just the side and the bottom edge there. Trim these extra threads. Or another thread there. Right, that's great. Actually, that gives you a really good idea of how your bag is going to look in the end. So this can be put to one side for the minute, along with the back panel that is just stabilized and nothing else. Okay. You can double check that you've done it on the right shoulder if you want at this point by imagining that that is your bag. Right, now we are going to need our strap tabs, which should be interfaced. Okay, we should have 2 of these. Apologies, I'm trying to move this so it's not in the direct light and shining back at you, but it doesn't seem to work very well. Okay, so we're going to draw along the centre of these. So these are 2 inches 5 centimetre wide, so we're going to draw a line at 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres wide. Along the centre there, and then we're going to retrieve our pressing mat. Well, you've probably got a proper ironing board, so just go over to the ironing board, which is a lot easier. Okay, and then we're going to fold each long edge into the centre and give it a little press. Okay, so fold that into that centre line. Little bit of a press, and the same the other side. And what I like to do with things like this, I fold it over. Oh, hang on, that's not quite in the centre. Fold it over, make sure they're all tucked in nicely, and give it a little press from this side, and then just leave it. If you've got something vaguely heavy, like my mug, you can just leave it on the top there. This mug says safety never takes a day off, which is very nice. My friend Rebecca made it for me, which I'm very grateful for, and I tend to use it when I'm videoing. It's nice and easy to use them. Got to stay hydrated, especially when I'm talking so much. So I'm going to do that on both of my tabs. That should be nice and flat now, so we'll move that out of the way. And then the other one, so these 2 long edges should come in to meet each other in that central line. Okay, and I'm just going to fold it over and give it, it's probably overkill because I am going to stitch it. Okay, just give that a little press while it cools down. It does tend to help it to sit nice and flat then, nice and crisp. Isn't it funny? I hate ironing in real life, but in sewing I wouldn't dream of doing something like this without an iron. Okay, so on the right side, so that's the side, so the wrong side is the one with the folds on. On the right side I'm going to use my top stitch in stitch length, and I'm going to stitch along each long edge, and I'm going to sew at 1/8 of an inch or 3mm away from the edge. And I'm going to do one side on one of them, and then the other side, the other tab, and then I can just snip that and bring it back around. This is great if your machine struggles with starting and edges and things like that. Mine actually doesn't, but I still do it this way because I have previously used a machine that did struggle a bit with starting neatly. I guess it's just habit to have a little feeder tab. Okay, there we go. Right, 2 top stitched tabs. Couldn't think of the name of them then. Now we need our hardware, so we'll need 2 triangle rings. I'm using Emmeline Bags triangle rings because it's nice and super shiny and good quality. Okay, and we're going to thread these through. So we're going to thread the wrong side of the tab through the triangle ring to the center, and then we're going to stitch to secure. So I'm just going to sew on the very end for the minute just to hold that in place. And the same with this one. Okay, and then we're going to flick the page. Check I haven't forgotten anything. What you can do at this point is to add a line of top stitching as close as you can to the triangle ring. You don't have to do this. I just find it stops them flooping around a little bit more. So I'm just going to change my foot over to a narrower foot. I have got a proper narrow foot, but of course it's, oh, of course it's here. Ah, there, that's where it is. I've been looking for that for months, thinking that I have lost it, and actually it's here in my little sewing trolley upstairs. So there we go. When in doubt, have a good tidy up, I expect. Okay, so this is an adjustable zipper / piping foot, and you can just adjust where the bottom bit is, the sole, in comparison to your needle, and get a really, really tight seam allowance on there. So I'm going to hold my threads, do a couple of back stitches, sew all the way along, and I'm going as close as I can to the ring, but you, as I said, you don't have to do this. And then I'll do the second one as well so that they match. Oh, very nice. I'm getting excited about this bag now. You can always add rivets later on if you want a little bit of extra bling. That's no problem. Okay. Now we're going to retrieve our main panel again. I'm just going to change my foot back over. No other profession would you be talking about changing your feet, would you? Changing the size of your feet with a screwdriver. But apparently we do lots of things in sewing that are a bit funny. Or not necessarily sewing, but bag making especially. I think it's probably because we're a newer newer hobby, and we just kind of make it up as we go, I think. Which is probably why I find it so much fun. Not very good at rules. Okay, so we're going to retrieve our front main panel, not that one, that one's the back. So it's this one with the zip pocket on, and then we're going to pop these on. So now mine will be back to front compared to yours if you're doing the right shoulder version. So we're going to measure in from this long straight edge, not the angled edge, the long straight edge, and we're going to pop it an inch in, or 2.5 centimeters in, from the edge of the bag to the edge of the tab. And I'm going to line up the raw edges, okay, and then on the shorter piece, so this is on the angled edge, and then the shorter piece here, we are going to pop this in, lining up the raw edges. I'm going to pop it an inch and a half, or 3.8 centimeters up from the bottom. So if you're doing the bag to wear over your right shoulder, then yours will look like the image in the pattern, and if you're doing it on your left shoulder, then yours will look like this. So the top one is going in an inch, or 2.5 centimeters from the edge with the raw edges lined up, and then the second ring is going in on this short edge under the angle. And we're just going to base these into place in the seam allowance to hold them in. And I'll do both at the same time so they're done. And I have back stitched at the start and the end, and a little bit over them, because I'm using quilting cotton. If you're using faux leather, then just beware not to do too many lines of stitching, because it can weaken your fabric. Okay, so the main panel is done. Although what I'm going to do, I don't want these rings to flop around while we're doing our final construction, so I'm just going to pin these into place to make sure that they don't move. Okay, and then we can pop that to one side. Okay, we need our handle strap next, straps. So we should have two A pieces, and they're two exactly the same length. If you're using webbing, then you would want to cut your webbing in one piece, but to reduce the fabric requirements, we've got a piece strap on this one. If you've got the same fabric in a longer length, then feel free to just cut it in one piece, that's no problem at all. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to draw a line at 1/4 inch in from the edge. I'll use a white chalk marker in the hope that you can see this on the camera. Okay, so I'm going to do one line on the right side, and we're going 1/4 inch, or 6 mil from the short end. Okay, and then the other line I'm going to do on the wrong side, and again it's the same measurement, 1/4 inch or 6 mil. I'm doing it on the wrong side, so I've got one on the right side, one on the wrong side, and then we're going to line it up. So I like to have the one with it on the right side facing me. Okay, right side up. The other one we're going to place wrong side up, so right sides together, and we're going to line this up on the line, on the right side line, and with our line, so we've got 1/4 inch overhanging, so I've got 1/4 inch showing off the bottom one, and then the top one I've got 1/4 inch hanging over the edge there. Okay, and then we're going to draw a line from this bottom corner to the top corner there. We're going to try and be as accurate as we can, and that will give us our nice straight strap. So where those two fabrics intersect at the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to pop a couple of pins in, and I'm going to double check this before I sew it. Okay, oh, I've lost the head of my pin there. That's not very good, is it? Try again. Okay, so to double check it, all I'm going to do is take one of those pins out and flip it down as though it was sewn along that line. Flip it down, and if that looks like it's going to be in a straight line or straight enough, then that's okay. Flip it back over. Now we're going to sew from the top to the bottom, or the bottom to the top, on this line. We're going to use our regular stitch length, but we're going to sew exactly on the line as accurately as we can. And I'm going to back stitch at the start and the end. I know I've got 2 threads here, there they are. I'm going to trim those threads. Now before you trim anything or cut anything, I'm just going to open it out and check that that does indeed form one long strap. Yes, it does. And then we can cut this extra piece off. So on a strap, I like to do at least 1/4 inch or 6mm seam allowance. So line up the 1/4 inch line on your ruler along that line, and then I like to use my rotary cutter to whiz along, and then just that little triangle there on the end as well. And then you can fold this back and give that a nice press, and that will form your long strap. If you've cut it all from one piece of fabric, then that's completely fine. You can skip this bit, or a bit of webbing. It's nice to have a bit of webbing sometimes on these smaller bags, isn't it? Oh, I've forgotten the other triangle. You'll soon find if you've forgotten to trim something, because it will poke out. And I'm going to open my seam allowances, press those open. There we go, lovely. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to draw a line along the centre and then press my edges into the centre. I'm going to go and do this downstairs on my long table because it's a little bit awkward up here, but that's basically what I'm going to do, and I'll come back and show you what I've done as well. Okay, so I've ironed my strap, got it all ready. So first thing you do is fold it into the centre. I've also drawn a line in the centre to help me with my folding later. So you just fold it in half and give it a press, open it out and press each long edge into the centre, and then fold it in half again along the original line, and you'll have a nice neat strap apart from the ends. I've also put my cardigan on, which I'd like to apologise for, because I try not to wear anything too fluffy in my videos so that it's not distracting, and I just can't today because it's really cold. So I'm sorry for that, but I thought it's probably better to put my cardigan on and not freeze on video. Okay, so what we're going to do then, we're all folded, we're going to unfold slightly and fold it back on itself to match up those folded edges there. Okay, try and make sure those folded edges are nice and accurate. So on the wrong side you've got your raw edges and the centre of your inside of your bit, your strap, that's what I mean. And then we're going to sew using our regular seam allowance and our regular stitch length, and we are going to sew across the end using our regular seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch at the start and the end, and it helps if you can be really accurate with those folded edges together. And give that a snip, and then we're just going to trim the excess from each corner, and I'm going to repeat the same on the other end. So fold it back on itself, make sure that fold is nice and accurate, stitch across the end, trim these threads and clip these corners. Okay, through all layers rather than just some. Pop those little bits in my bin. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're just going to turn this strap right sides out. So you've got the right side there, it's a little bit like a canoe or something, a nice little boat. So we're just going to fold that right sides out and just push that corner out. I'm using the end of a spoon, end of a teaspoon, and that should nicely sit together. You can press it again at this point, or you can just go for it. Mine is still quite nicely pressed, so I'm just going to make sure that all of my edges are together and give it a little clip there, and then I'll fold the other end right sides out. Make sure that's nice and neat, and then a little clip. Okay, lovely. So I'm going to use my top stitching stitch length for this, and I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch or 3mm away from the edge. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sew around all 4 sides of the strap. I'm going to sew on this open edge first, along the short edge, up the second long edge and the second short edge. Okay, it doesn't really matter where you start and stop, but I do like to start on a gappy opening-y bit. Okay, and you can back stitch or you can overlap. Okay, so I'm at the end, so I'm just pivoting, sewing along on the short end, and pivoting and back up the second edge. These threads out the way, that's it. I'm just going to carry on round. I'm back to the second short end, pivot, carry on round to where I started. There we go. Right, so now I can trim these threads. That's our strap ready. If you're making this bag for somebody else, you can always double check the length of the strap on them. This should be good for most adults, unless the adult is particularly broad around the chest. Okay, so we'll retrieve our strap slider. Oh, I better turn the page, check I haven't forgotten anything. Retrieve our strap slider and 2 swivel clips. Okay, so we're going to pop that through. So we're going to, with the right side of the ring and the wrong side of the strap. I don't know that it really matters, but if you've got a right and a wrong side, then do it on the wrong side. And we're going to pop it through the furthest hole, over the middle bar and out the other side. Okay, and we're going to fold over by 1.5 inches. And then we can stitch this into place. I'm going to do a couple of rows of stitching here just to make sure that it's nice and secure. You can add some rivets if you like to use rivets. Okay, so keep that with the right side of the slider facing up still. And then one of these swivel clips. I do like these, they are very nice. Strictly speaking, you don't need the swivel clips. You can do this strap straight into the seam or add rectangle rings, however you like, but I just think it gives you a bit more freedom. And also, if you're wearing a really bulky coat, you can undo one of the swivel clips, put the bag on and then clip it back up again, so you haven't got to struggle to get your arms through. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to thread a swivel clip onto the end of the strap. So keep this strap slider right sides up and just thread that through so that it looks a bit like that. And then we're going to pop the end of the strap over, so through the strap slider again, over the edge that we've already secured and back out again. Okay. And then we're going to add the second swivel clip, just thread that through from the right side to the wrong side and fold it over. So that should be on, the folded over edge should be on the back edge of the slider. A little bit more, so we're going to fold that over by 1.5 inches or 3.8 centimetres. And I'm going to clip that because I'm going to sew from the right side. The same stitch length as we had before. And again, I'm going to do a little bit of back stitching just to make sure it's nice and secure. There we go. Just trim all of my threads off nice and neat. I think that elevates your bag then, doesn't it, if there's no loose threads. And I don't trust myself enough. I've seen people burning them with lighters and I just don't trust myself not to set fire to my fabric, so I don't use that. Right, there's our strap done, and we can pop that to one side. Strictly speaking, we don't need it till later, but it made sense to pop it into the pattern at this point, and also it will prevent me from procrastinating on my strap. Procrastinating? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, procrastinating. Very good at procrastinating when I'm making straps. So we can pop that to one side along with our main panels. Now we're going to work on our card slots next. So retrieve your card slots, and you should have card slot interfacing as well. Now these card slots are optional. You don't have to make these. If you don't think you're going to use them, then please don't feel pressured to use them at all. Okay. Right, so we're going to work on the wrong side, and we're going to write top at the top, or a T, your choice. I might just do a T. Okay, and then we're going to draw a series of lines. Now what have I got that is different colours? I don't know that I've actually got anything that's different colours at the moment. No. Okay, so it would be helpful if you can colour code your lines, but if you can't, don't panic too much because we have got the measurements on here. So we're going to draw lines at the following distances. So I've turned my panel round, so as long as I remember that I'm working from the top. Now I'm not going to tell you all of the measurements because they are in the pattern, and if I tell you all of the measurements, I've got to tell you them in imperial and in metric as well, which is a little bit overkill. So the first line we draw, how many lines have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines all together. Okay. Now this is the one part of the pattern where you do need to be accurate if you are making this. Okay, so make sure that everything's lined up, all aligned nice and straight. So there's actually 1 3/4 inches. Oh, I don't know what that is, 4 centimetres maybe, in between each line. Right, you get to a point where you've got to turn it around, turn the ruler around, which is fine. sometimes you're used to using it the way you're used to using it though, aren't you? Or I am anyway. Okay. There we go. Nearly there, that's number 4. And all the measurements for these are in the pattern in imperial and metric. And it's not that I'm not telling you them because they're secret, because they're not, because they're in the pattern. It's just a bit long-winded and easier for you to refer to them yourself in writing. Okay, so I've got my 6 lines there, and we are going to fuse our interfacing, our 3 little pieces of interfacing. Turn it around so it's facing you. I'm going to fuse them under the 2nd, the 4th and the 6th line into the middle. Okay, so it's all of the ones that are in red on the image. Give that a little bit of a head start by giving it a bit of press. Okay, so again, working from the top, it's not the first one, it's the 2nd line, and we're going to pop it just under that line and sort of centered. Okay, not the next line, but the next one down. So 2nd, the 4th and the 6th, just under that line and centered. And the final piece on that final line, just under the line and centered. And we're just going to fuse that into place. No need for too much interfacing on these, that would be overkill. So we've just put it along the top of the card slots, so they've got a little bit of sturdiness but not too much. Okay, there we go. I think they're nice and secure. Now we're going to be doing a lot of pressing and flipping and pressing and flipping and pressing and flipping. So if this does confuse you, just remember one way, one the other, one way, one the other. Okay, now what I'm going to do before I start is, because I haven't got a pressing mat on camera, I'm going to score all of my lines before I start. The instructions have you score them individually as you work, so whichever you prefer. So I'm using a Hera marker, which is just a plastic tool. It's got a sharp-ish edge. It's not really sharp, but it's a fine edge, and you just sort of swoosh it along that line, and it leaves a little crease behind, which will help us to fold nice and accurately. And even though these folds are going one way, one the other, I'm still scoring them all from the back. I didn't want to do any lines on the right side of the fabric, because I think that's when you risk being left with marks, even if you used chalk really. Okay, so I'm just scoring all of these lines. Last 2, and then we can get on with the fun bit. Okay, lovely. So we'll pop that to one side, retrieve my pressing mats again. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I caught the camera there. That was taller than I remembered. Okay, so I've scored the lines. Now we're going to turn the panel over, and we're going to fold it right sides together along that first line. Make sure that your edges are nicely lined up. In the image I've got coloured pins to help you see where everything is in relation. Okay, so I'm just pressing on that fold, that line. That was the wrong button. I shot water at my sewing machine, sorry. Okay, once we've pressed that, we're going to flip it back over, and we're going to fold along the next line. Now you should find that that folds along the crease nice and neatly, but it's worth noting that there should be half an inch or 1.2 centimeters between that line and this folded line. Okay, once you're happy with that, give that a little press. Okay, and then we're going to flip the panel over again and fold along the next line and a little press. And at this point I'm trying to only press on the folded lines. Okay, so we're just going to repeat that, folding back and forth, flipping over, back and forth. Don't worry too much if you need to open it up like so to make it nice and accurate. This is actually easier with pins in the side, I've decided. Okay, so that, let's double check that on my half an inch in between. Okay, that's more accurate there. And give that little press. Press along a bit more of it now that I'm nearly there. And then flip the panel over again and fold along this line. Again, you can double check that you've got your half inches between them, or 1.2 centimeters. Yep, that's great. Okay, and then finally fold it back over again, and the last fold, just going to fold it up along that line. Now before I press that, I'm just going to double check what I've got. Okay, so on this side I've got a half inch, and then at the top, that's very hard to see at the top, got nearly an inch at the top, and then on the back, oh dear, I've pulled it wonky. Okay, so before I do my press, I'm just going to double check half an inch, and then that one should be less, about 3/8 of an inch. Before I do my final press, I am also going to, I am not, because I don't have it, I need my card slots back in. You can double check the size of that against your card slots back in. I'll just double check it against the measurements for the minute. I think I might have dropped that coming up the stairs to film, so I'll need to go and retrieve it. Okay, so that should be 4.5 inches wide by 4 inches high, which is, let me tell you that in metric as well, for those working in metric, 11.5 centimeters wide by 10 centimeters high. So that's not quite accurate. Mine was a little bit tall. Okay, great. Once I'm happy with that, give that a nice good steam press through all the layers like so. Right, I'm going to leave that to sit while I go and look for my card slots backing, which I appear to have mislaid. I had everything all piled up nicely in order and it's not there, so I've obviously dropped it on the stairs somewhere. So why don't you also leave yours to sit just for a few moments to cool down, and I'll be back once I've found my card slots backing. Right, I've retrieved my card slots backing, so now I can try my card slots on top and double check that matches. Yep, great. Okay, so now we can unfold our card slots, and these little peaks of our folds where it's got these little raised up bits, we're going to top stitch along them 1/8 of an inch or 3 mil from the edge. But just have a little look before we do. and look at, this is the way our slots are going to look at the end. So we want to be top stitching on the right side. Okay. I mean, your top stitching might be perfect, top and bottom, in which case it doesn't matter. But mine is better on the top. Okay. There's one. I'm going to do the second one now. I'm only back stitching at the start and the end really out of habit. It is going to go into a seam, so there's no need for it. And then that third one as well. Excuse me. It's that season, isn't it, for coughs and colds. I say that, but it's been like that for most of the year. So okay, right, so I should be nicely top stitched with all of my threads cut, and I'm not. I've got 2 sets of threads to cut. Okay, so once we're happy, we're all nicely top stitched, we can refold our top stitching all nice and neat. Little press. And then we're going to match this to the card slots backing. Now your interfacing doesn't go all the way, that's intentional. Don't worry. Use some clips this time. So we're going to sew round all 4 sides and we're going to leave a turning gap along the bottom that we can turn through. I don't suppose it matters if it's the bottom or the top, really. Yeah, I suppose you can choose top or bottom. I think I'm in danger there, having my mug there, aren't I? Because I'm going to put some clips into it, I think. Accidentally. Right, I'll use my regular construction stitch length. And let's double check what seam allowance we are using. We are using our 1/4 inch seam allowance, or 6mm seam allowance, so slightly narrower seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch either side of the turning gap. Okay, make sure these are all staying nice and layered up. Okay, so I'm going to go around most of the edges and then I'll leave a turning gap in the bottom edge. Back to bottom edge, there's my turning gap. Now I am going to baste across my turning gap because I think it gives a much neater finish at the end. So I'll increase my stitch length to a basting stitch and go across that bottom turning gap. And just give that a little press to set those stitches in. And then we're going to trim these corners. We're going to take as much fabric as we can out of them. So I'm going to snip straight across, and then I'm also going to go into the seam allowance a bit more just to reduce some more bulk out of these corners. And we will grade these seam allowances as well. But any extra bulk you can take out at this point is just going to help these card slots sit a little bit neater in your bag. You could pop these card slots in any bag, to be honest. Use this on any pattern you like. Okay, so what we're going to do to grade them, we're just going to pull the card slots backing layer back and trim the seam allowance of the card slots. Okay. Don't go too close to the stitching, definitely not through the stitching, but just if we can reduce a bit more of that bulk of fabric, it'll be nice and neat then. Okay. Oh dear, this was a mistake doing this on my pressing mat, wasn't it? Right, so what we're going to do now, we'll unpick those few basting stitches that I've got in my turning gap. And then we can turn it through and push out all the corners. Okay, lovely. Right, so we're going to turn this through the turning gap nice and gently. Take it steady, we don't want anything to tear or rip or pop or anything, because we have graded those seam allowances, so there's not a huge amount hanging on right now in there. It will be strengthened when we do our top stitching to stitch it into place, but just for turning it through, nice and gentle, steady does it. Okay, so I'm going to get my spoon again and I'll push out these corners. My spoon, make sure they're nice and neat. I'm just running that along the side seam as well. Make sure that's turned out fully. Okay, now that looks pretty good even before having pressed it. Make sure everything's sitting down nice and neat inside those slots. Now I'm going to press the top part first. Nice bit of steam. Make sure I'm happy with that before I even consider turning this turning gap under. Oh dear, my spoon has gone through my corner. Let's turn that back a bit. Add a little dab of fray check. You can do that if you trim a bit too close to your corner. Of course, I'm talking from experience here. Okay, so when I turn that through again, I'm going to be a little bit more gentle on it. There you go, and leave some tucked in. And then I'll tuck my seam allowances of my turning gap in under this gap. Give those a little press. Lovely, nice and neat. Okay. Right, now I'm going to top stitch along this top folded edge, or not top folded edge, the top edge of the seam. I'm going to use my top stitching stitch length. I'm just going 1/8 of an inch or 3mm away from the edge. And that's mostly about appearances, so that it looks the same as the card slots, but also I think it helps everything stay in place nice and neat. Okay, and pop my pressing mat to one side now. Okay, so decide which one's your inside back panel. I think it's easier to have it so when your zip is open you can slot in, it's on the back lining panel. So that's going to be the front. So let's line this up, make sure that I'm doing it on the right side. That's going to be the front. So yeah, so it's going to be on this panel here. Okay, so we're just going to line this up 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters away from the bottom and the side edge, like so. And then I'll pin that into place. I can see me putting clips in that mug, I think. I'm going to have to try very, very carefully not to. So I'm just pinning in these corners to stop them going anywhere. And I'm going to start here, back stitch, and you know, I am going to do a couple of good back stitches there just to secure it, and then I'm going to sew down the side to the corner, pivot along the bottom, pivot and back up to top, and a couple of back stitches at the top here just to secure it. So we're going to have our 1, 2, 3 card slots and a little slip pocket in here. Okay, and I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch or 3mm away from the edge. And it's at this point that if you've got any cards handy, I would recommend that you just double check these slots are the right size for your cards, nothing's gone wrong, you've kept the right seam allowances and everything fits nice and neat how it should. Okay, right, lovely. So that's our lining panel done. So our main panels are prepared, our exterior and our lining. We only really need to prepare one exterior and one lining main panel because the other two are plain. So now we're going to work on our zip. So we need our last zip and our zip tabs. Now because I am videoing and I don't really want to stop and pause and keep you hanging on, I'm going to skip ahead and do number 34 first. Okay, so it tells you to trim the zip so the teeth are 6 1/4 exactly, or 16 centimeters. So I'm just going to line this up on my ruler. Double check they match, yep, and I can trim that. Okay, and then I'm going to add a nice dab of glue. Don't know why I said nice. Is a dab of glue nice? I guess it must be. Oh gosh, I had my glue bottle on its side and it seems to have exploded out just there. Right, so holding these two edges together so your teeth are in the center there. Just going to add a good dab of glue there, and then a clip to hold it together. Okay, so make sure that glue is right in the hollow of the clip so that the clip doesn't get glued to it. I could do with listening to my own advice there. There we go. Okay, right, so I'm going to put that to one side while we're doing this. Okay, so what we need to do is, I'll get my pressing mat back again. Could do with a smaller one of these, couldn't I? So we're going to fold each tab in half. There's no interfacing on these at all. They are just the fabric. Don't need any interfacing on them. They wouldn't sit very nicely on the finished bag if they had interfacing on it. It would make them too thick. So we're going to fold it in half and give it a press. And then we're going to unfold them and fold each short end in by 1/2 inch and give it a press. So my top tip for this is double whatever you need to fold it in by. So we're folding it in by 1/2 inch. So I've drawn a line 1 inch in from the center. So we're folding in by 1.2 centimeters. So I'm drawing a line at 2.5 centimeters. I suppose it'd be 2.4, wouldn't it, for metric? And then I can fold each edge into that line and give it a press. And that's my 1/2 inch fold over, or 1.2 centimeter fold over. And And we're going to do this on both tabs, both sides of both tabs. Okay, try not to scald your fingers on this one. There we go. Okay, and if you want to fold them in half, just to double check that they are the right size and they match, you can do. My folding is not hugely accurate at times, so I am folding them in half just to double check. Give them a little press. Okay, we can pop this over to the side. Right. Okay, so in theory our glue has set well enough, or as well as it can. We'll work on this other end for the minute until that's set. So we're going to open our tab out again and retrieve some double-sided tape. And we're just going to pop a little bit on each folded over end. And just pop it right on the raw edge there. Okay. Oh, pulled that one off by pressing it down. Do it again. Okay, lovely. So make sure that's nice and pressed down. And then we are going to line up our zip with that raw edge and give it a nice press. Make sure your zip's sort of in the centre, because we can trim these zip tabs down later so that they line up. Okay, and then we're going to fold it over and match that up. And then we're going to top stitch over this 1/8 of an inch away from the folded edge, or 3mm, that is if you're working in metric. Now make sure, if you're using continuous zip, at this point you want to make sure you've definitely got a zip pull attached in between these two tabs, because I've seen some absolutely beautiful zips with zip tabs attached and no zip pull. And you have to unpick it then and redo it. Right. I don't think that was quite enough time to dry, but should be able to muddle through. Okay, so I'm doing exactly the same on this second tab. Unfold it and add some tape. And then unfold and add some tape. And take the backing off, and then we're going to line these up with the edge of the raw edge of that and make sure they're nice and even and perfectly together. Fold that over, line everything up nice and neat. There we go. And then we're going to top stitch that into place the same as we did for the previous one, 1/8 of an inch or 3mm from the edge. Right, lovely. So I have got my zip pull attached, which is helpful. Let's put my tape away. No, let's not put my tape away actually, because we need that. We need that. Silly sausage. Right, so I'm going to use my front panel first. So that's the one with the zip pocket attached. Oh dear, excuse me, I'm making a right mess today. Good job it's only water. Now, if you haven't already marked the centre of these angled edges, then please do so now, because you will need to know that. Okay, And then we're going to mark the centre of our zip. So just fold that in half. And I'm going to use my chalk pen just to draw a little line on the back there. Okay, great. So what we're going to do now is just pop a line of double-sided tape along this edge. So I'm just making sure that my centre matches my centre, and I don't know if I can see that little pencil mark, because we don't want to tape further than the zip really. So we'll add a little bit of tape, just the length of the zip really. Okay. I'm adding it right along the edge, this angled edge. Great. Okay, take the backing off and then pop this on top, matching up that centre. Okay. Right. Now we're going to baste this into place. What we want really is, once your zip's closed and your zip pull is at the top, sorry, once your zip is closed, we want your zip pull to be at the top, facing the top of the bag, so that you have got the zip pull at the top and you're not worried about things falling out every time you open it. So we're just going to baste this into place along this edge. Let's see where we are basting it. 1/8 of an inch or 3 mil from the edge. As you come close to that zip pull, you can stop, pull your zip pull out of the way, lower your presser foot and carry on. Okay, lovely. Right, now I can see on my zip, the zip tab on that side is slightly wider than my zip, so I'm just going to trim that down, and that one. I must have lined them up with the side rather than the centre. Okay, so that's one part done. Then what we're going to do is get our plain lining piece. So this is the piece that hasn't got anything on, and it should match up like so. We'll find the centre of the angled edge again, just for the sake of doing things properly. Okay, and then a piece of double-sided tape, just the length of the zip again. So don't go past the length of the zip, because we don't want these seam allowances to be stuck together later on. Okay, make sure that's nice and adhered. Peel that one back, and then we're going to pop the lining on right side down. So I'll match this up and then I'll show you what we've got inside. Pressing that down so it's nice and secure. Okay, so inside then we've got right sides together, our exterior and our lining, with that zip sandwiched in between. I'm going to close my zip so the pull is near the top, because I'm going to start at the bottom here. Now we are going to sew, let's have a look, along the entire angled edge through all layers, and we are going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, are we? Let's have a look. No, we're not. We're going to use our regular seam allowance. Okay, so change down to my construction stitch length. If you're using a number 3 zip, if you've changed the pattern, then you will want to use a 1/4 inch or 6 mil seam allowance. Okay, just wanted to double check I haven't forgotten anything before we carry on. Okay, so I'm going to back stitch at the start and the end, just try really hard to maintain that seam allowance next to the zip. If you've got a zip foot, now is the perfect time to use it. Of course, I just always use my walking foot. Otherwise, a zip foot would have been a lot easier. Can I wiggle this zip pull down? I don't think I can. I might have to lift my needle and come out. I think my zip pull's caught under my foot. Unzip it and go back in and just overlap a couple of stitches. I won't trim those threads, so it'll be nice and secure. Okay, lovely. Right, so we can trim those threads. Let's just have a little look at what we've got. So we can, oh, take the pin out and fold that back. So we've got the zip sandwiched in between. That's very nice. Okay. So we're going to fold this back. We're going to top stitch along the edge of the zip. We are just going from tab to tab, so we don't want to go further than the edge of the zip. So if you want to press it, now is a great time to press this. I'm just going to clip these back. Seam allowances either side. We're not going to top stitch on these seam allowances these side because those are going to go into our seam. Just going to fold that back. Just whiz over here and do a quick press rather than get my whole pressing mat out. Okay, right, so we're going to top stitch from this end of the zip tab all the way up to the end of the other zip tab. Okay, so only the length of the zip and the zip tabs. I'm going to use my top stitching stitch length, and we're going to sew 1/8 of an inch or 3 mil away from the edge. Okay, just move my zip pull out of the way and then carry on. And back stitch at the other end. Okay, lovely, we're halfway there on our zip. Just trim these threads before I go much further. Okay. Oh, lovely, that looks great. Okay, so now we can retrieve our second main panel, and again let's find the center. Of course, this is something you should have done in step 1 or step 2 or something, and I never seem to manage it. But there is always the possibility that one video I might start with saying I've marked my centres. So I hope you keep tuning into my videos just in that hope, really. Okay, so a line of double-sided tape. And remember, we're not going the full length, we're just going the length of the zip. So let's double check that. Yeah, that's fine. Peel this backing paper off. And then is my centre mark has disappeared. I thought it might. I was using chalk. As it goes through the sewing machine, it tends to rub off a little bit sometimes, but that's okay. Go back and do it with pencil. Okay, so right side down, lining up the centre. I'll just base this into place and then we can have a look at what we've got. Okay, so you're kind of ignoring the fact that this half has already been sewn, and then these two are right sides together on your exterior. Let's start with my zip pull open. I'm going to start from the top this time, and I'm just going to base that into place 1/8 of an inch or 3 mil away from the edge, my longest stitch length. see if I can close my zip pull on this one. Yeah, there we go. I think it just got stuck on my foot before, probably because I'm using my walking foot for everything. Okay, so we're just going to repeat exactly what we did for the other side. So we're going to stick another line of basting tape just along the length of the zip. Remember, don't go past the length of the zip. Lining up that raw edge. That's it. To about there-ish. Peel that backing off, and now we're going to get our lining piece, which has got the card slots attached to it, if you have in the card slots. And we'll actually, I can use pencil for that. Mark the centre so that we're all nicely lined up, and just stick that into place. Keep it in place temporarily. Open my zip pull. Okay, so we're going along the entire length, regular construction length, stitch length. Okay, and we're using our 3/8 or 1 centimetre seam allowance. Back stitching at the start and the end. Now I wonder whether I can get my zip pull out of the way this time. Let's give it a go. No, I think it keeps getting caught on my foot, I think, on this one. I think it must be the angled edge of the pouch, because I don't usually have this trouble. Okay, so I'm starting exactly back where my last stitch was. There's no problem with lifting up. I should probably just swap to using a zip foot one of these days, shouldn't I, really? Funny, I use my zip foot for doing strap tabs, but not for doing actual zips. It's very lazy of me. I know lots of people with this machine don't even use a walking foot. They just use the regular narrow foot, which is probably fine. Okay, so that looks fine on that side. How does it look on the outside? Oh, that looks great. Okay, so let's fold these seam allowances back and give that a little press as well. Do some top stitching. Oh, lovely. Very nice. Add a little pin there so that I can press it and it's nice and even. Okay, I'm going to quickly just give that edge a little press over here. My pressing mat. It's funny, I have got an ironing board at my side, but I would need another camera, I think, to be able to show it. Okay. Right, well, we can start from the bottom this time. So remember, we're just top stitching along the length of the zip, from zip tab to zip tab. And using my top stitching stitch length. And sewing up to the end of the other zip tab. Lift my presser foot and move my zip pull out of the way. Give it a little trim, these extra threads. Lovely, we're very close now. We'll be off for our adventure very soon. So first thing we're going to do is leave our zip pull at halfway at least. Probably get away with a bit more than halfway actually. Okay. Have a bit of water before we do this, just in case. Right. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to fold these panels right sides together. So we've got our 2 exteriors and 2 linings. There, try and get these bits of fluff out. There we go. Okay, so we're going to match up the lining to lining. I'm going to match up the exterior to exterior. Make sure that zip pull's hanging down there. Now we're going to match up all of our raw edges. So I've got my exterior panels here. Just going to now these are a bit of a funny shape once you match them up. Don't panic too much. Actually, before we start, I'm just going to open these seam allowances at the end of the zip and clip those together. There we go. Might use a pin for that one. That's the key to a nice neat end of zip on this one, is to have those seam allowances open. That's why we only use basting tape between the two zip tabs, so those seam allowances are not attached together and we can open them up. Right. So I'm just clipping along the entire length of this exterior. Now I've still got a couple of pins in there from my strap tabs, because I didn't want them to go wandering, did I? So we can open the seam allowance of this bit at the top where our zip is attached. Let me clear a bit of space because I'm in danger of knocking things out of the way. Okay. Right, so that's our exterior all clipped together. We're going to do exactly the same on the lining. Now you need to decide where are you going to turn this through, because you can either turn it through this long edge or this short end, and it depends on you. It's fully your choice. If you turn it through the long end, or the long edge, sorry, it's a lot easier to turn, but you have got more of a turning gap to close up at the end. If you turn it through the short end, then it's a bit of a pain to turn through. You do need to have a little bit of huffing, puffing patience, but it's a lot less to close the turning gap. So in the step pictures, I did it through the short end, but in this one, I'm going to do it through the long edge, just so you've got both options, both varieties. Right, so we are going to sew around the entire perimeter of this. So I'll probably start here or here, maybe here where my turning gap is going to start. I'm going to sew to the corner pivot and sew to this corner pivot up, and then we're going to sew over this nice angled seam bit here and then onto the exterior all the way around. Okay, so I know it's a bit of a funny shape, but we are going to sew around the entire outside. So I'm going to start with sewing my turning gap, I think. Again, I'm going to baste it with a long stitch length. Now let me double check what seam allowance we've got here. I think we've got the normal 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre seam allowance. And I'm not going to back stitch at the start because I'm using my basting stitch to do my turning gap. I think I might stand up for this just so I can see exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so as I'm coming close-ish to where I want my turning gap to end, go back down to my construction stitch length and do the back stitches. Okay, and then carry on round. And take your time on this because there are some fun angles, corners. Gone a bit far there, so let's reverse one. Okay, so I'm coming up to this inside corner here, so I'm just making sure everything's nice and flat so that it fits under my presser foot nice and flat. Okay, and then I can pivot, make sure I'm on the right seam allowance, and down we go. Now, I felt that I was just going over a strap tab there, so I've gone back and gone over it, just for a bit of extra security on that strap tab, because I'm only using quilting cotton. Okay, over the zip pocket and pivot. Now it's at this point you can sort of feel where that zip pull is, so just make sure that the tab of the zip pull is out of the seam allowance, not in danger of getting caught. And as I come back up to the top, I can feel the second strap tab there. So as I go over that, I'm going to give it a little bit of extra back stitching. Okay, now we're coming up to another fun angle. Make sure that's all nice and flat to go under the presser foot, and then we can pivot. There we go. Okay, we're pivoting on the last side. And then a bit of back stitching for the end of our turning gap, and I'm just going to finish off my turning gap like so. Okay, there we go. That was fun, wasn't it, with those angles? You all love some fun angles. Right, okay, that all looks good to me. So there's a pin we can take out. I'm going to give this turning gap a little bit of a press just over those basting stitches, because we can remove those. Now I'm going to trim all of my corners, so the easy corners like this, as I say, you can trim as normal. Maybe not quite so much as I did on my card slots, because I don't want any little gaps on the outside of my bag. Okay, so those ones are easy, and then on these fun ones I'm just going to snip into that corner, then trim a bit of extra bulk out of this corner here and this bottom corner. Now it's quite hard to see where your seam allowance is, so follow it from the side and you can see, right, that's my seam allowance for sewing the two panels together, because you've got a seam allowance there, of course, from doing your zip pocket, and they should be the same, but they're not always, are they? That's okay. Okay, and then this other fun one, just a little snip into seam allowance there. Lovely. Okay, right, so now we can unpick this turning gap and turn our bag through. I think I've got a little hole there now, yeah. There we go. Much easier to rip it, isn't it? But then you've got to go back and get all these threads out. Didn't think that through. There we go. Nice and easy, lovely. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is reach through and find those pins that we've got. So I know I've got a pin in the top there holding that strap tab in. I'm going to remove that. And I know I've got a pin down there holding that strap tab in. So I'm going to remove that because we don't want any kind of stabbing or poking. Now I'm just gently going to turn this through. So you can turn the lining over the exterior and then turn it through. Or you can sort of do it in one big, all in one go, really. Just take your time on this one. It's a a very firm bag to fit through quite a small zip opening. So don't force it, just take your time. I find it's easier to use my thumbs on things like this. Seem to have a little bit more strength. Brilliant, there we go, there's our bag. Right, I can see it's strap tab, so I can actually just give that a little tug and that will pull that bottom corner out. Oh, top corner as it is. And there's the other one, can pull that out. And then just work my way round all of the corners, just getting those corners out. You can pop your turning tool in, or spoon as I like to call it. There we go. So in these ends where the zip is, if you can make sure that those seam allowances are still open, then you'll get a nice neat finish there. Turn that top corner out fully, that's nice and neat now. Make sure these seam allowances are still open. Fold that down nice and neat. I think this is always the worst bit, because you'd want to just get on and say that your bag's finished and go and ring the finish bell really at this point, but you've got to take your time, because otherwise it will just end up looking like it is at the moment. This bottom corner's being a little bit more stubborn. Just take my time on that one. There we go. One of my tester's husbands very helpfully pointed out that there was a corner of the bag missing. I think he thought he was funny, maybe. Right, lovely. Okay, so once you're happy that the exterior is turned out the right way, then we can make sure the lining is all in place before we close our turning gap. So just, I know we're going to pull it out again. Okay, that's all fine. This bag will need a good press before you use it. Okay, so that all looks fine. So before I give it a final press, I'm just going to close this turning gap. Now the way you should close the turning gap is by using a hand ladder stitch, which will close this really nice and neat. However, I'm going to use a close machine top stitch because my hand stitching is absolutely atrocious, and I do actually want it to look nice for the recipient. Okay, so I'm just folding that turning gap under the seam allowances, and I can follow that line of holes left over from the basting stitches. Just seems to fall quite nice and naturally. Okay, right, so I'm going to whiz along here very carefully, obviously, but still whizzing with my machine, closing that turning gap. As I said, you will get a much neater finish if you use a hand stitch or even a matching thread. So I'm using my green thread on the machine because a closed turning gap is better than an open turning gap. And I don't want the recipient to lose everything into the seam allowances. There we go. Okay, lovely. Pop these pins back in there before they go walking around. Okay, and then we can pop that lining back inside. Just make sure everything's all nicely pushed into place where it belongs, down in these corners. It takes a little bit of manoeuvring to get everything where it belongs. It will need a nice press. So we've got our card slots in there. Plenty of space for whatever we want to bring, as long as there's not overnight supplies, I suppose. And then once we give that a press, that will sit nice and neat. With your zip tabs, you can either tuck them in like so, or you can have them poking out, your choice. And then all you need to do is clip your strap onto these triangle rings, and then you're ready to go on your adventure. There we go. So I think that looks great actually. Let's compare that to my right shoulder one. Got lots and lots of loose threads on here. I'll have to do a bit of lint rolling around. So I think if you press from this side, then it does help the whole bag sit nice and neat, which I will do. And here's my one for my right shoulder. So the green one's for my left shoulder, the blue one is for my right shoulder. That's how I like to wear them. You can wear it however you like. You can use it as a little backpack if you want. So I have, I think that's very satisfying. So actually, I think it looks great and it didn't take me too long and I quite enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed sewing along with me. And if you do make one of these adventure slings, please do tag me and show me at Sewing Patterns by Mrs H. Thank you very much for joining me. Bye bye.